Hello, I am Dr. Robert White, and now I'll be presenting you Chapter 4 of Kloppenborg's Contemporary Project Management. Chapter 4 is about organizational capability, structure, culture, and roles. You can see the determinants of project success include project planning activities, effective execution of monitoring, controlling, and closeout. And then on the bottom there, you've got relationship building activities, empowerment, respect, and trust. And those are the determinants of project success. And we'll be talking about the bottom half of this chart here. Here's some of the topics we'll cover: types of organizational structures, culture, project life cycle, executive roles, project manager roles, and team roles. Core objectives are compare and contrast the advantages and disadvantages of functional, project, strong matrix, balanced matrix, weak matrix structures of organization. Describe organizational culture elements that are helpful in planning and managing projects. Compare different project lifecycle models and distinguish when each is appropriate. We'll also describe how to tailor your development approach according to the PMBOK Guide 7E. We'll describe the duties, motivations, challenges of executive, managerial, and team roles in project. And we'll explain ethical behavior that is consistent with PMI's Code of Ethics. We may talk a little bit about Agile and how that works together. Okay, let's talk about types of organizational structures. We've got a functional organization, a projectized organization, and a matrix organization. Let's start with the extremes. So a functional organization is a project organization where the people are grouped on the basis of specialization function, and the project manager has limited authority to assign the work. So it looks like this, right? You've got the president at the top, and then you've got your different VPs of your different disciplines. And basically each one of these people get put on loan to projects or get part of their time assigned to projects as projects go on. So some of the advantages and disadvantages: clear unity of command, only one boss giving instructions. That's really nice in the functional organization. Secondly, workers learn from each other and keep their skills sharp. So if you group all your electrical engineers together, they can share best practices and keep each other's skills sharp. They continue to report to the same functional manager. Projects begin. That's the whole point of a project, is it has a clear beginning and an end. But no matter what, a person has the same functional manager they report to. And the final kind of major advantage is you can share resources among multiple small projects. So if you have a portfolio of projects that only take 20% of time for a functional engineer, then that functional engineer can do 5 projects, no problem. The disadvantages are slow communication across multiple functions, technical difficulty in getting input from other disciplines, and some long communication channels for slow decision makings for the projects. Okay, then let's talk about the other extreme, which would be a projectized organization. It's defined as a structure wherein the employees, co-located or not, are grouped by activities on a project, and the project manager may have complete or very close to complete power over the project team. This is the strong project manager organization. So you can see here you've got the president of the project organization, and the project manager is reporting directly to him or her, right? And then each one of the functions gets assigned to the project manager, and they execute their project. So some of the advantages: you don't get those traditional department barriers. You don't get finance arguing with CMP or anything like that. Everybody's aligned on the project. You've got a unity of command. Everyone's focused on delivery. Communication response times are very fast on the project. And if you co-locate, then that means the team members are physically close, which is normally a powerful thing to do in a projectized organization. Of course, some of the disadvantages: if you only need a part-time engineer, you may still be paying for 100% of the time because they're fully on the project. So some teamwork methods may differ from those in the organization, so it's difficult to go from project to project. And teams may fail to communicate lessons learned, right? There's no big overarching VP of marketing that collates and distributes lessons learned. And finally, some discipline specific competence may suffer. If a discipline is too focused on delivering the project, they may not be focused on their core discipline. Now, what a lot of organizations do is say, okay, if you're willing to do this side or this side, what about something in the middle, right? So a matrix organization is where you've got the project manager that share the responsibility and accountability for the project with functional managers. So it looks like this. Across the top there, you still have the functional managers, and across the side, you've got the project managers. So some of the advantages and disadvantages: the advantages are you can still get that shared resources. That's nice. Reduce duplication, cooperation between departments. continued development of discipline-specific knowledge, effective integration, lessons learned shared effectively, and flexibility. The disadvantages, this is a big one for most of us that have worked in this kind of organization, is you have two bosses, right? Do I answer the phone call for my functional manager or for my project manager? There's more sources of conflict, of course, more meetings, and more challenges to control. I find that, in my experience, though, the matrix organization works good with mature employees, with a culture of mature employees, professional type employees. It's not so hard to have two bosses. Okay, so obviously there's a gradient of everything in between, right? So on the left side of this graph, you've got the functional, and the right side you got the projectized. And for the organization, who has the power? In a functional organization, the functional manager has almost all the power, whereas in the projectized on the far right, the PM has almost all the power. And you can see the spectrum in between, right? So you can have anywhere on this entire spectrum of a project organization. This is just a matrix showing some of the advantages and disadvantages on one chart to make it easier to break it down. So let's talk about organizational culture now, right? Values serve as a moral compass to guide us and provide a frame of reference to set priorities and determine right or wrong. So organizational culture impacts projects, of course. It motivates ethical actions and communications. It determines how people are treated, controlled, and rewarded. It establishes how cooperation, competition, conflict, and decision-making are handled, and encourages personal commitment to the organization. So let's talk about what's the culture of the parent organization. So how do you judge the culture of the parent organization? So what's the corporate culture in general? What are the values? Do they have standard project management practices? How's the organization viewed by others living in the values? How does the organization communicate? And how does the organization support project management? So a successful PM needs to understand the culture that he or she is working in. These are some different types of power, right? So if there's different types of culture, right? So the culture is a power culture. Everyone tries to please the boss. If it's a role-focused culture, everyone follows their designated roles. If it's a task culture, everyone's focused on the task. And if it's a personal culture, there's much more focus on people needs and development. Here's some other cultural norms, right? Responsibility, own decisions, respect ourselves, others' resources, fairness, impartial, honesty, truth. Project cultural norms, so this is the project within inside of an organization, is of course impacted by the project's organizational culture. It's influenced by the sponsor and project manager, and an ethical culture on both defines how people should act and encourages them to do so, especially when things get tough, which inevitably on a project there are challenging times. Okay, let's talk about a few different models of the project lifecycle. So this is the traditional PMBOK lifecycle, right? Where you've got selecting, initiating, planning, executing, closing, and realizing, right? And in each one of these, you got the approval to receive. These are the decision gates at each one of them. So at the end of selecting, initiating, you have a charter. At the end of planning, you have a kickoff. At the end of executing, you have a project result. And at the end of closing and realizing, you have some kind of administrative closure. That is one model of a project lifecycle, right? Another model is this DMAIC mode, right? Define, measure, analyze, improve, control. This is much better for continuous improvement type projects, right? So for example, if you want to improve an assembly line and say, take out a step that's causing waste, right? You would define the problem. You would say, okay, we're creating X amount of inventory at this process step. Then you go and you measure it, make sure that that's the actual right. You analyze, you look at the root cause. Are you doing too much push instead of pull? Is there some kind of waiting time that you're not dealing with, or do you need another, a parallel machine to reduce waiting time somewhere upstream? Then you improve and you go implement the solution, and then you control, right? So you're going to continue to monitor to make sure that what you measured is actually improving the way you wanted it to. And then the next one is the R&D lifecycle model. This is for more unknown, more research development, right? More broad scope type projects, right? So you start with idea generation, and you get an opportunity analysis. Then you do idea screening, and you do a business case. Then concept development, proven concept, validation, prototype. transition, first lot, and handoff, right? This is also a good model for pharmaceuticals. And then there's the construction lifecycle model, which is what I'm most familiar with. This is how we do most things in major infrastructure projects. So you start with pre-planning, then design, then procurement, then construction, then startup. Very straightforward. I would argue that there's another life cycle out here, which is operate after startup. It's arguable whether that's actually in the project life cycle or not, because it's fundamentally the end of the project life cycle, but it is the asset life cycle. Okay, let's talk about some of the major roles on projects. First, we'll talk about executive roles. So these are the people that aren't directly on the project, they're overseeing the project. So you got the steering team, the sponsor, the customer, or the project management office. So here's some of the traditional executive manager on the social roles. So executive, as I just said, the steering team, the sponsor, the customer. The managerial level, these are the actual project managers. You got the project manager, or in a functional organization, the functional manager, like we talked about earlier. Then you've got a scrum master, which is like the agile term for a project manager, and a facilitator, which is someone who is not necessarily the project manager, but has stepped out a little bit of the project and able to kind of advise the project manager, make things happen, facilitate meetings, verify that certain processes like management change are followed, and that kind of thing. And then an associate level, these are going to be your core team members, your subject matter experts. This is going to be your electrical engineers, your cost engineers, your people that are actually doing the work on a regular basis. So helicoptering back up, the steering team, this is the top person in the organization, his or her direct reports. They do overall priority setting, project selection, sponsor selection, all this kind of thing. Also known as executive team, management team, leadership team. At Shell, we call these guys the decision review board. The sponsor, this is a person who has a major stake in the project outcome, usually going to be on the steering team. They have a lot of say in picking the project manager and the core team. Depending on the seniority, they may mentor the project manager, and their big role is in chartering the project and making sure that charter is followed. They also big focus on stakeholders, right? So the sponsor is going to be the one that's managing the external stakeholders, and also the non-technical risks on a project, the economic, commercial, organizational, political risks on a project. Here's some of their job evolves over time, right? So overall, they're going to provide resources, do that stakeholder relationship, and deliver results. At Select, they're going to identify, select, prioritize projects. At Initiating, they're really looking for the project manager and how to charter the project. At Planning, they're meeting the key stakeholders, making sure they're informed, and also ensuring some planning. At Executing, they're nurturing those stakeholders. At Closing, they're making sure the stakeholders are happy. And then finally, realizing they're ensuring those benefits are there in line with the original charter. A project management office is something you see in a lot of major organizations, and they're really responsible for the how of the execution of projects, right? So the sponsor is more about the what and the why, and the PMO is much more focused on the how we do it. So they help identify potential projects. They make sure that there's a manageable set of projects. They ensure the resources. They charter the teams. They reward participants, and they enjoy results of successful projects. The chief is he's the head of that organization. It makes sure the team members get necessary training, capture lessons learned, use standards and templates where appropriate. They're also going to be the ones that usually set what kind of tools a project uses, like what kind of management change tool, what kind of cost control tool, things like that. Okay, then let's go back to the manager level, right? So this is the functional manager, the project manager, the facilitator, right? They could be department heads. They have a large role in deciding how the work is done. You're going to see a lot of this with the specific tools of an area, right? So getting down to the detail of, do the planners use Primavera or do they use Microsoft Project, that kind of thing. The project manager, of course, is the focal point of the project, leads the planning, executing, closing of the project, and responsible for delivering the results. So here's some of the things a good PM should do. Integrity, be a good communicator, effective scheduler, achieves desired project cost, manages cost control, all the things we think of when we think of project management. Another thing the project manager do is he's kind of the hub of the wheel of all the stakeholders, right? So the sponsor does have a large role in managing external stakeholders. The project manager is also going to work a lot of the internal stakeholders and assist the sponsor on some of those key external stakeholders like regulators. Now, this is a kind of a leadership break, and that an important thing that a project manager needs to do is know when to use which kind of leadership style, right? When the project manager needs to know when to lead versus when to follow, when to repeat versus when to change, right? Because sometimes replication makes a lot of sense, right? And you can deliver projects faster and cheaper when you replicate. But if you replicate something that doesn't work, that doesn't make any sense. So you have to do some change, right? Sometimes they need to promote order versus innovation, right? Sometimes it's about empowering, and sometimes it's about saying, no, we're not going to do that. We got to stay on task. So the project manager is constantly trying to toe the line of some of these things and adjust as necessary. So you can see some of those competencies and some of those decisions are based on life cycle, right? So in initiating, it's about listening and questioning and generating feedback and consensus building. In planning, it's straight his or her technical skills and how they deliver and build that consensus. At implementation, results oriented, truthful, honest, and frankly able to say no to a lot of things to include changes, yeah, while still being able to get along and be a team player. And then at close, it's about, can you write a good closing report? Can you share information, credit, and show some pride in what the team has accomplished? Facilitator is when it's a complex project or opinions are varied. Sometimes it could be somebody disinterested, could be the chief projects officer, maybe a consultant. But it's basically somebody on the project that helps facilitate things. And here's some of the project team roles, right? So the core team members are there from start to finish. They make decisions, they carry out objectives, understand the technologies, may supervise the subject matter experts. A lot of these are going to be like contract holders that are delivering contract values on behalf of the project to deliver activities. Subject matter experts, great examples of this are going to be like your welding subject matter experts. You may not need a full-time welding expert on your project, but maybe there's a subject matter expert that you can bring in temporary to set up a quality welding program, and then maybe bring back every 6 months to a year to check it. Okay, in summary, every organizational structure has advantages and disadvantages. Many organizations have informal matrix relationships. Organizational culture is a formal and informal way people treat each other and relate to each other. Projects follow a predictable life cycle. Projects require executive, managerial, and associate level roles. The project manager has a central role in project